Morning, Guy, in fact, this evening saying that we could fall to 124 on the cable rate if that hung parliament is confirmed. And I guess what we've really got to talk about is that the exit poll is a decent indication historically. But there's going to be some very, very close seats out there. And the first thing that Francis Maud said was, look at the SNP losing a considerable amount of seats. You'd have to think that some of those seats were pretty tight up in Scotland.
Some of them were. I'm going to be intrigued to see how the North East votes. I'm going to be intrigued to see how Wales votes. There are a bunch of seats here, and remember, this is a kind of national snapshot. It doesn't give you that kind of locality issue that is going to be so critical in some of these key constituencies that are going to be fought over. The question, I guess, for many people within the Conservative Party this evening is what went wrong. How did this happen when we thought we were coming into this election with such a big majority, and how do we now react to it? And it's that reaction function that I think is very difficult to understand, because the leadership of the Conservative Party has been effectively run by three people.
Yes.
Theresa May, Fiona Hill and Nick Timothy. How does the rest of the party react? Let's get Phillip Blond's take on that. Phillip, good evening.
Good evening.
You are as surprised, I suspect, as many people within the Conservative circles about the numbers that we're seeing this evening. A, to Francis' point, from Maud's point, do you believe them? And B, what is the reaction function within the leadership of the Conservative Party now going to deliver?
It's very, very surprising, because nothing we had other than the YouGov poll, and it may be that actually, which wasn't a poll, or was, is the most accurate indicator, but none of the MPs, both Labour and Conservative that I know, and I know quite a few, reported anything like a Labour surge. I was having conversation with people in marginals this morning who felt that there was a swing towards them as Conservatives. So this is very, very surprising. I think it's right to have some caveats around it, such as, will the SNP really lose that number of seats in Scotland? I'd really be rather surprised. But it's very hard to counter the overall drift of an exit poll. They have a very, very good degree of precision.
They're not out by that much.
They're not out by much. And we do know that all of the polls that were out there all varied by something like turnout rate. So they were all the polls predicting 100 plus for the Conservatives, all relied upon the idea that the historical turnout by young voters would stay the same. And clearly it must be the case that that hasn't happened. They must have turned out in unprecedented numbers. We certainly know there was a rise in registration, but that we are where we are. I think, where did it go wrong? I think the Labour Party had, actually, on reflection, a very good manifesto. They spoke to the fact that, as we've spoken about many times on Bloomberg, globalisation isn't working for an increasingly large number of people. People feel desperately economically and socially insecure. There has been a massive turn back, I would argue, to security, not of the sort vis-à-vis terror, but the sort of, what on earth am I going to do about my schooling, my housing, my welfare benefits? And the Labour Party, to their credit, produced a positive vision of how the state could be deployed to secure people. The Conservatives didn't. Apart from the principles, which I thought worked really well, the opening 10 pages, the rest of it was negative and penal.
The one-issue election very quickly stopped being a one-issue election.
It really wasn't.
The market has got to deal with this. Ken Vexter of Acumen Management here in London writing in that we blew through stops at 127.80 on cable. Market's got to figure out what's going on now. If you do get a proper hung parliament, you're going to see 125 in a heartbeat.
Mizuho out with a note as well, saying if the poll is accurate, this left swing should be viewed as a negative for UK gilts on the basis of a lurch left of to the centre of UK politics. From the centre of UK politics, we expect to see gilts underperforming swaps tomorrow if this poll is accurate.
And the emphasis is on the word if right now. Jordan Rochester, FX strategist at Nomura, great research over the last couple of weeks on this. Thank you very much, sir. And to Phillip Blond at Res Publica. He'll be sticking with us. Coming up on the programme, in 2015, the Scottish National Party's success proved crucial to the overall election result. How might their anti-Brexit stance affect things this time around? We'll be live to Edinburgh. That's next. From London, for our viewers worldwide on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio, this is Bloomberg.
The breaking news this hour, the United Kingdom appears to be headed for a hung parliament after the general election called by Theresa May. According to exit polls, her Conservative Party will fall short of a majority with only 314 seats, down from the 330 that the party held before the vote. Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn and his Labour Party will win 266, up from 229. John, the market reacts.
I've got to say, pretty much everyone we've spoken to are looking at this exit poll with a huge dose of scepticism at this point, but the market has to adjust and it reacts lower for the cable rate. 1.54% on the screen at the moment, in negative territory at 127.59. Euro sterling pops higher, up by 1.4%. So stronger euro, stronger dollar, but really it's all about a weaker pound. A weaker pound that just has to adjust to a huge amount of uncertainty now, Guy. That's not a weaker pound adjusting to a hung parliament at this point. For pretty much everyone we have spoken to, it's just a huge amount of uncertainty fueled by that exit poll that a lot of people, including Phillip Blond to our left, are questioning in a significant way.
A lot of people are questioning this. I think we should just be absolutely crystal clear about that. We're going to go to Scotland in a minute, where it does seem to really be kind of almost the epicenter of that story, that uncertainty surrounding what the SNP story looks like. But as you say, this is the reality we face in front of us at the moment. My big question is, when does the market look at this and say, Brexit's going to change? Brexit, the notion of Brexit as we thought it was 24 hours ago is going to change.
And I think for the market, it was always that short-term sentiment story. We're seeing that on the screen right now. That longer-term Brexit story. I think that's going to take at least 24 hours to really get our heads around that.
Let's talk about what is happening north of the border. In the 2015 general election, the Scottish National Party won 56 of the 59 seats available. The leader, Nicola Sturgeon, has campaigned strongly against Brexit and for Scottish independence, of course. Will that change things north of the border then? Let's get the story from our Bloomberg News senior editor, Ronnie Jefferson, who joins us from the Scottish capital, Edinburgh. Good evening. Many people are questioning the exit poll, trying to get their head around exactly why the SNP would have lost the level of seats that it appears to have done. Any explanation, Rodney?
Well, if this exit poll is right, I mean, it's a pretty disastrous evening for the SNP. The main issue is that, I mean, they weren't expecting to lose anything like this. They would, if they really, and that's why I think they're stressing that it's early days and it's just an exit poll, is that they were expected to lose. I mean, 10 would have been significant. I guess what it's done is it's underscored the fact that in Scotland, the divide, the political dynamic is different. All of Scotland, all the districts voted against Brexit. And what's happened is the push for independence, the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, as you said, taking that and running with it as being, okay, this is unacceptable and we're going to push for another independence referendum, has divided the country. People that I spoke to in the run-up to the election don't necessarily want another vote. And maybe tonight's result has been a reflection of that.
What happens in that kind of environment? Where does it leave Scotland? Where does it leave Scotland at its place in the Union? Where does it leave Scotland going forward from here? Where does it leave Nicola Sturgeon as a leader of the SNP?
Well, that, you know, obviously this will all be borne out, right? So, but if we're taking the exit poll at face value, right, there are two sides to this. First of all, yes, it will have undermined the independence. They'll still come out with a majority of the seats in Scotland, but again, weaker. And certainly, people will have demonstrated that they don't want necessarily to have another vote on independence, and they've rebelled against. Voters have gone against the SNP on that. But at the same time, if we are headed for some sort of hung parliament, right, then even though they have fewer seats, or would have fewer seats in the UK Parliament, it could give them scope to be part of some sort of, well, certainly hold more sway in a hung Parliament. So that's the flip side. So in terms of where it leads Sturgeon down the independence path, I would presume definitely weaker. Where it leads Sturgeon in terms of the UK, well, remains to be seen, but potentially stronger.
Phillip Blond, I want to bring in a comment from the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. the big question through the night, and we won't know the answer until the sun is up, is whether the Conservative numbers plus the Ulster Unionist parties add up to a majority. I can't see the other parties supporting the Tories. Isn't that what's going to be difficult here? Finding a partner, given the experience that we've had previously in this country, very recent history over coalitions.
I think you're absolutely right, John. I think that's accurate. We are now in a situation where the Conservatives will need a partner, but nobody will want to partner with them. And by the same token, all the other parties added up together aren't enough to give you a working majority either. So I'm afraid to say, it seems to me, if this exit poll is accurate, we're going to face another general election, probably in October. And I think even if it gets slightly better, even if, say, the Conservatives come in with a majority of 10, I think the Prime Minister's position will be untenable. They will have to have a new leader, and I still will go to the polls within the year.
Here's the interesting thing. The clock's ticking. Article 50's been triggered.
We were meant to start negotiations in the next few days.
So how's that going to work?
It can't work, can it? If we are in a situation where there's no government to begin the negotiations, how can you begin the negotiations? I think the very first thing that we'll have to do is set up longer transitional arrangements, longer time limits on Article 50, which of course you can't do. So if we're in a situation that we're not actually in a position to begin Brexit, that again, or Brexit talks, that again is pressure for another general election.
Okay.
That's where we're heading.
Let's bring in Emma Ross-Thomas, our London Bureau Chief. Good evening.
Okay.
Many questions surrounding all of this. Let's start off with a difficult one. Is Theresa May going to be able to sustain her position as the leader of the Conservative Party if this poll is in any way accurate?
If the poll is accurate, then I think it's kind of unlikely that she would, that her position is tenable. She called this election when she didn't need to. She ran an extremely personal campaign, you know, a very tight group of people advising her. She, you know, there are already lots of voices in the Conservative Party saying that, you know, they're disgruntled not only by the way she ran the campaign, but by the way she ran our government as well. So anything short of a, you know, massive win, you know, 100 seats, something like that, was always going to put her, or for her personal authority and her personal mandate, in question.
So where do we go from here then?
Well, I mean, chaos, as you've laid out, perhaps another election, and also when it comes to Brexit, let's remember that during the campaign, you know, Theresa May used the sort of bogeyman of Brussels as a sort of campaigning tactic. Now, how willing are our European partners to be, in light of that, to give us an extension?
Or we could have, here's a thought, we could have the idea of a national government for Brexit negotiations. If we actually can't form a government, and yet the timetable is ticking, something like that, I can imagine Keir Starmer partnering with David Davis, something has to begin. Well, because it's that extreme. If the exit poll is to be borne out, where nobody has an active majority, where a government can't be formed, where it's so unstable, and we face the most momentous decision that we faced since the Second World War, arguably, ideas like national governments, that's exactly when they come into play. I mean, I don't think this will happen. You know, I hope that we'll end up with a working majority. But just taking this at face value, where the margins are so thin, and as you quite rightly say, Guy, the clock is ticking. What else can we do? We can't just delay it for another year until we get ourselves sorted.
Emma, there's going to be some guys and girls on the trading floor across London right now that thought they were going to be clocking out at about 11 a.m. local time, who are going to be working through the night. What is the guide through the night? What have you got to look for specifically? Sunderland has not gone Tory for what, 50, 60 years?
Yeah, nice.
That's not going to be the bellwether. What are you looking for?
So coming up, I would look at Amber Rudd's seat, because of course if May does resign, then you're looking
Amber Rudd's
at a leadership.
YouGov said could go.
Right, exactly, in Hastings. So that is certainly one to look at. Obviously Scotland too. Murray. Where else to go?
Are we looking at seats where UKIP was strong? and we're trying to understand where that swing has sort of moved.
Yeah, that's what you look for. What will tell us is where the UKIP vote has gone, because the overwhelming assumption was that the Conservative Party would capture the majority of UKIP votes, and that's 4 million votes. That's a lot of votes. But if this exit poll is accurate, and I stress if, then it doesn't seem like those UKIP votes has gone to the Conservatives. Either they haven't voted, or indeed they've gone for the Labour Party. Which actually, if you drill down into UKIP voters, that would make sense, because what they're concerned about, just like Front National voters in France, they're concerned about economic security. And the idea of the state protecting them is what Labour was offering, is something that would appeal.
Just one thing to point out also on the sort of arithmetic of all this. Of course, 650 isn't the denominator necessarily. You know, we take out the Speaker, we take out the Sinn Féin, and so with the maths so tight, every single seat counts, right? So, you know, the maths of the Labour and their possible coalition takes you to 318, and also May, you know, with the Northern Irish Party, she could just get a majority.
Depends how well Sinn Féin do. And kind of what the swing is, what the swing looks like in Northern Ireland and some of the key seats there.
Yeah. Also remember that in 2015, the exit poll was wrong and underestimated the Tory share. The Tory
and it grew over the
evening. Exactly.
Well, one way of monitoring how that's going to be developing over the next few hours, there is a fantastic function on your Bloomberg EU Go. You'll end up with a screen that looks something like this. You're going to get all the details of what is happening within the process, but you can also use this map here. We're going to break it out for you on a constituency by constituency basis. You can zoom in and look at some of those constituencies. They're not populated yet. We're going to start up here, John, in the North East of England. Sunderland counting and counting hard as we speak.
Special thanks then to Phillip Blond of Res Publica and Emma Ross-Thomas, of course, London's Bloomberg Bureau. It is another political shocker potentially on the cards if the exit polls are anything to go by. Our election coverage continues throughout the night right here on Bloomberg, plus